In an ad tech world that stepped off the cookie deprecation roller coaster not too long ago, identity and addressability remain a central challenge for how brands find, understand, and connect with audiences. This is Noor Naseer for AdTech Unfiltered. In this episode, I'm joined by Ali Mack, VP of AdTech at Experian, the company best known for their credit bureau, but in AdTech for their data and identity engine that connects online and offline signals for targeting and measurement across channels. She brings perspective on what building identity strategy today can look like. We talk signal addressability, the evolution of identity graphs, balancing privacy with precision, first-party data, and more. Let's jump into this episode with Ali now. Ali, thanks for joining me to talk about identity, addressability, and just the future of targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's hop right into it.
Okay.
I want to hear a little bit from you around us coming out of this very long era of discussing a cookieless future. There were not going to be cookies, then there were going to be cookies. How are we changing our identity strategies to meet this moment when there are less cookies out there now?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I am grateful for the experience of will they, won't they when it comes to deprecating cookies, because I think what it's allowed for the industry to do is to be more thoughtful about how we describe an identity and an identifier for individuals. So whether it is, Google making a decision to keep cookies or to take them away, we still are dealing with compliance and people opting out of providing that information. So how can we make sure that there isn't one identifier to rule them all? And that we're actually looking at multiple different addressable identifiers to make sure that we have just like an omnipresent view of a person and the ecosystem. At Experian, our thought is more is better, and that you really need to make sure that you aren't relying singularly on one identifier in the future, which I think is where everybody is headed.
Brands are obviously, whether it's brands, advertisers, they're worried about being able to track their audiences or find new audiences, given the fact that there is a depletion of signals or identifiers across the space. There's always change.
Yep.
Is there anything that you're able to alleviate some of those concerns with for an advertiser who wants to future-proof and prevent that degradation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the industry is getting smarter about what to expect out of identifiers and how to work with different types of identifiers within data science and within ways that make sense to kind of build out a full household or build out a whole ecosystem or understanding of an individual. I think in the past, we relied heavily on cookies and the internet as the only way to define an individual. But now we see other signals and ways of collecting those signals to really give us a better holistic view of a family, a person, a household, et cetera. So in my mind, it's a lot of education, but it's also a lot of looking across many different parts of your data sources, asking the right questions about where that data is being collected, how often it's being collected, and really prioritizing that organization. Companies are getting smarter at that, and brands are getting smarter than that.
People are always talking about omnichannel and the importance of it and how you have to do it, but it's a challenge to link across a multitude of screens, especially when you're doing a variety of digital screens plus CTV.
Yeah.
How do you help navigate some of those types of expectations or desires for advertisers who want to do that successfully?
It's really important that you think about your use case first. So your use case might be different than one of your competitors or a different media company, but you need to figure out how you're going to prioritize identifiers and then come up with a really solid identity graph that then you can translate your identity graph with any of the partners that you're working with. Obviously, Experian is in the marketplace with our identity graph across many different partners. And we feel like having the same truth set with us across those partnerships allow for you to scale campaigns and media much faster than what you used to in the past.
So identity graph sometimes feels like a buzzword that people use, but I think it can mean different things depending upon who's talking about it.
Sure.
Can you expand a little bit on what identity graph means and how advertisers or brands should be thinking about developing one?
Yeah, absolutely. At Experian, we have two different types of graph. We have an offline graph as well as an online graph, but really how we organize and view the world is through what we call a living unit ID that then ladders down into personal IDs or person IDs. And so for us, the graph is really a way of organizing the different types of signals that you're seeing and prioritizing that through households.
How can marketers more accurately lean into attribution and frequency control through a variety of identity opportunities?
Yeah, frequency is always going to be really hard. I think that because of what we've talked about before with there just being a deprecation in one single identifier like cookies, that it's going to be harder for us to understand how to cap a frequency at a household level. I think it comes back to the organization and making sure that you're having all those real-time signals and that you understand how people are ingesting media and how you're prioritizing connecting all of that media through measurement on the back end.
This is a challenge that's been addressed a multitude of times through conversations I've been having, which is how do you find the right balance between considering people's privacy while also targeting appropriately? How is it that you frame that conversation at Experian?
I think that there's a compliance issue, right? And not wanting to do anything that feels sneaky or illegal. But then there's also a brand experience that you want to make sure that you're hitting the right person with the right message at the right time. And so it's really critical to think about like, what does that feel like for each brand? And is it different depending on the brand that you're working with, right? So for us, it's really trying to understand who that person is and what you're trying to sell and making sure that like you're having the right balance between both.
What are some effective ways to balance consumer privacy and the need for getting a data-driven insight? So not just the targeting, but the insight piece on the other end.
It's probably, for me, the same because insights actually come first, right? So how are we collecting that data? How are we making sure that we're building out the right profile of who these individuals or who these households are? And then targeting after that, right? And then it's in that space where you might also be looking at outcomes closer to real time than we have in the past and say, okay, we understand that like when we're targeting these types of individuals, they react better, or it's better for us to do more brand messaging because in the long term, we're seeing better conversion rates towards the end. So for me, it's really, again, looking at the holistic view across the space and being really smart about, going back to the why. We often get caught up in a lot of the buzzwords that are out there right now, whether it's, real-time outcomes, it's AI, it's how are we optimizing, when really at the end of the day, you really have to think about, are you selling a car or are you selling nail polish? Because those are two different actions. The way that people interact with those brands should be very different. So I really want brands to kind of like remember the customization and the importance of like always going back to who you are and asking those questions about why before you kind of just go on with a media plan because of, what might be hot in the space right now.
I was saying that cookies were a thing that they were here, then they said they were taken away, and now they're available again. I think something that's had a somewhat similar but different trajectory are data clean rooms. It seems that there's a lot of momentum behind data clean rooms as people are finding a necessity to leverage them. Can you tell me a little bit more about the speed to adoption with which they're being received today?
Yeah, I think that AI definitely is playing a role in how we're able to move faster in clean rooms than we were in the past. Data is messy. Data is hard to collect. Data is hard to make sure that you're using in a smart way. And it used to take a lot more technology and data science to upkeep within a clean room, where I think now we're able to do that and individuals are able to do that at a much faster and easier pace than what we were able to do in the past. I think that's also why you're starting to see first-party data become so relevant again, is because it's a lot easier now to clean that data, add insights to it, and figure out the best way to activate.
Data partnership is also a part of these conversations. If we're thinking about identity graphs and being able to find and build our audiences in the most effective ways possible, partnership is necessary. What's your take on data partnership opportunities to get both better addressability and better insights?
Yeah, we partner with over hundreds of people in the space. I think that partnership is always going to be important. Not everybody has everything, right? It's important for us to have conversations with each other and to make sure that we're always open to learning from each other and collaborating as much as possible.
What does that evaluation process look like, right? You just said you have hundreds of partners that you're working with. It's an ongoing process. You're trying to cater to the needs of many different types of clients from different industries.
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how you vet something through to make sure it should be a part of your partnership consortium?
Yeah, of course. So we definitely have a whole team who is focused on looking through these data partnerships and really understanding how is this data being collected? Is it important to our clients? What kind of net new value does it have that we don't already have in the space? And as we've said at the beginning, cookies are being deprecated every day. Identity is changing at an ongoing clip. So is data and data collection. So how do we make sure that like what we're continuing to research and review and who we're partnering with is interesting?
Do you find that marketers today need to rethink attribution because there's been a reduction in deterministic signals, or are there other approaches that they can go by to really lean into attribution in meaningful ways.
Yeah, that's another key reason that it's important to have as many data partnerships as possible, because attribution is such a huge part of what we do. And it's happening more in real time, which is allowing people to optimize campaigns at a much faster clip. So I think it's important that you figure out a realistic understanding of how close you can get to the outcome at the end of every campaign, and then how you plan to optimize based on that.
Is there visibility that clients don't have today and tomorrow as far as what their expectations are from an attribution standpoint that they once did, where you now have to educate them on? You can see the full picture, but the picture is going to be a little bit different. Does that make sense, right? Like for instance, when we were talking about cookies earlier on, the cookie was perfect in some ways in that it was a beautiful, clean, closed loop, one-to-one. Now we have visibility, but the visibility is different. How do you navigate those conversations?
Yeah, it's hard, and it's important for everyone to have their own POV and not just rely on like a partner on what they think is the most important part of attribution. But like your media mix matters too. So is it, like at the end of the day, I saw that ad and then I clicked. Is that important that I clicked on that ad, or is it more important when I went and bought the car 6 months later? And how are you going to attribute all of the media spend in between that whole entire process? So I think it's important to prioritize what is that KPI that you're going towards. And if it is a purchase of some sort, how close can you get to those purchases, and how do you build that into your marketing funnel?
Here's a big question, maybe an unfair question. What strategies are going to be the most effective for activating first-party data?
I think the best strategies for activating first-party data is to clean and organize the house. How are you collecting all of that first-party data? How frequently are you updating that first-party data, then cleaning it, organizing it, and then deciding how do you decorate it? Do you think you have enough information just off of that first-party data? Do you want to try and expand that with some data providers to say, I understand that this individual works at this office building, but I also want to know if she's a cat lover, or, is there other random data points that are going to be really important for you to see as trends when building out your marketing campaign? So I think first it's how are you organizing it, and then how are you enhancing it?
Clients always ask about this, match rates.
Yep.
How can people improve them when that oftentimes is the caveat where they'll say, the match rates aren't always so good, so it's going to be a segment of a subsegment. What do you say to folks who are like, we need these match rates to improve?
I go back to the why with them often, and I say, what are you looking to do with these match rates? Like, do you care more about scale, or do you care more about accuracy? And then also going one step back before getting to that match rate, have you cleaned the data that you're working with? Is the match rate bad because you have 5,000 emails and only 2,000 of them are active? Because already then the match rate's going to be lower because you only have a data set that's, less than half of what you've provided us. So it's first really understanding the outcome that they're going for. Is it scale or is it accuracy? And then it's also what has been brought to the table in terms of identity to make sure that we're optimizing towards the right things.
What channels would you say are in most dire need of innovation to take advantage of some of the things we've been talking about?
I worked in TV for a long time, and I've been really excited to see a fast clip that become much of a more advanced space for advertising. I think that audio might be next. I've been hearing a lot about the importance of audio when it comes to AI, the way that we now voice to text is more popular, watching videos, podcasts, all of that technology is like catching up in the digital age. And so I see a lot of opportunity in that space.
Looking ahead, what do you think is the next big thing that needs to be unlocked for privacy-safe, data-driven advertising?
Beyond audio, gaming is a huge opportunity. And I'm not just saying video games. I also think mobile gaming has a lot of opt-ins that people are interested in. People who are gamers are super passionate. I think there's a lot of ways that brands could find better synergies in that space.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
Excited to see what shows up next. I think there's so much opportunity for advertisers. There's a lot of education to be done, and that means that there's a lot to come. So really appreciate the time today, Ali.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's episode. A big thanks to Ali Mack from Experian for breaking down the evolving world of identity, addressability, and the data strategies shaping the future of targeting. It's clear that a lot of innovation and education in the space still lie ahead. If you like AdTech Unfiltered, please be sure to subscribe, follow, or tell a friend. I'm your host, Noor Naseer. Another episode out later this week.